George Orwell predicted the AI takeover of art in 1949. 1984 by George Orwell is a book that few kids ever read. If they do, it's usually as part of like an advanced English class the year before they go off to university, or sometimes kids who are ready for it will pick it up as a personal reading selection. And sometimes they can get a little pretentious and annoying about it. But I have to say they're not as pretentious and annoying as those Atlas Shrugged kids. But the more time that goes by, the more I think maybe kids should at least be exposed to it in excerpts or summaries, because it's unnervingly accurate about a lot of things that go on in our society. George Orwell got so many things right about dystopian societies and those who abuse power that we've turned his name into an adjective, Orwellian, to describe anything that's just unnervingly messed up about society. Among the things he accurately described was the corruption of language. For example, I'm pretty sure that George Orwell would have been annoyed by the word problematic, because this is a word that doesn't actually mean what it claims to mean. It doesn't mean this is a problem, which would just be the plain way of saying it. It's a problem. Problematic means more like, I think it's a problem and therefore you should think it's a problem, and I'm going to manipulate or emotionally blackmail you until you agree with my position, or at least pretend to in public. I might be wrong, but that sounds like something right out of the Newspeak dictionary to me. I've seen a bunch of news stories this week about how the hottest new group on Spotify isn't a group at all. It's an artificial intelligence program that generates prog rock and is pretending to be a real band made up of real people. There's also the broader problem of AI musicians cloning the style of up-and-coming artists, creating a lot of music really fast, slapping an unnaturally good-looking face on the product, and, like a true parasite, outcompeting the actual human artists they fed on. This is certainly going to become a problem in fiction as well, and I would be shocked if a lot of children's TV shows weren't already being written by AI. I'm looking at you, Peppa Pig. When I heard this Spotify story, I was struck by how similar it seemed to the very bleak artistic environment described in 1984, in which one ruling political party has total control over the creation of art, music, drama, novels, everything. It all exists to serve the party. Now, I don't really think that's exactly what's happening with AI in our world, but I think the corrosive effects of handing off artistic production to machines is going to be no less bleak. The two main characters of 1984, Winston and Julia, live in a dystopian London where there's no real music, and they have everyday encounters with soulless art that was made with no human involvement at all. Julia has a job working on the machines that compose novels for consumption by the proles, or proletariat. She thinks the machines are interesting and enjoys working on them, but she couldn't care less about the end product. In Chapter 11, Winston asks her about the fiction created by the machines. "What are these books like?" said Winston curiously. "Oh, ghastly rubbish. They're boring, really. They only have 6 plots, but they swap them round a bit." This reminds me of conversations I've had with software engineers who find AI fascinating to work with, but then a lot of what AI produces is commonly called slop, which is really just another way of saying ghastly rubbish. Winston works in the records department, whose job is to consume all information about the past and then spit out the version of history most acceptable to the party, as well as produce media to serve current needs. And this is described in Chapter 4. There was a whole chain of separate departments dealing with proletarian literature, music, drama, and entertainment generally. Here were produced rubbishy newspapers containing almost nothing except sport, crime, and astrology, sensational 5-cent novelettes, films oozing with sex, and sentimental songs which are composed entirely by mechanical means on a special kind of kaleidoscope known as a versificator. I love that Orwell used the word kaleidoscope because this really does kind of resemble what AI does. Often when you put in a prompt to an AI machine, it'll come up with a couple of possible results based on your prompt, and then you can choose the one you like and iterate on it, and it really is almost like twisting a kaleidoscope until you get the image that you want to see. This means it's possible to generate a lot of music or fiction or film very quickly, but is the result really satisfying? Maybe. I've heard plenty of pop songs that were written by humans, which were pretty shallow and frivolous and had very light lyrics and non-existent themes, but I was still able to enjoy them because they sounded pleasant and they lightened the stress load on my day. But there's still something kind of unnerving about cutting humans out of this process entirely. Winston certainly isn't impressed by any of the machine-made music, as we see in Chapter 4. Under the window, somebody was singing. Winston peeped out, secure in the protection of the muslin curtain. The June sun was still high in the sky, and in the sun-filled court below, a monstrous woman, solid as a Norman pillar, with brawny red forearms and a sacking apron strapped about her middle, was stumping to and fro between a wash-tub and a clothesline, pegging out a series of square white things which Winston recognized as babies' diapers. Whenever her mouth was not corked with clothes pegs, she was singing in a powerful contralto. It was only an hopeless fancy. It passed like an April day. But a look and a word and the dreams they stirred, they have stolen my heart away. Forgive my horrible Cockney accent, but Orwell did write that passage in dialect. If you're not familiar with the Cockney dialect, then in standard English, those lyrics would read, "It was only a hopeless fancy. It passed like an April day. But a look and a word and the dreams they stirred, they have stolen my heart away." The passage in Chapter 4 continues. The tune had been haunting London for weeks past. It was one of countless similar songs published for the benefit of the proles by a subsection of the music department. The words of these songs were composed without any human intervention whatsoever on an instrument known as a versificator. But the woman sang so tunefully as to turn the dreadful rubbish into an almost pleasant sound. This sounds eerily similar to the situation with the AI artists on Spotify. George Orwell might have intentionally written some pretty bad lyrics just now, but I gotta be honest, sometimes we don't actually need music to be great. Sometimes we just need it to be pleasant to listen to help us get through our workdays. And if it's good enough, people clearly will listen to it because these new AI bands are getting quite a lot of followers. I've never labored under the delusion that Ed Sheeran writes great art, but that doesn't stop me enjoying some of his songs, especially when I'm busy and tired and I just want to hear something pleasant that doesn't add to my stress level by making me think. In the end, if a computer can produce exactly the same kind of sounds, is it all that different to me? And that seems to be how this lady in Chapter 4 feels. Winston continues to observe her. Down in the yard, the red-armed woman was still marching to and fro between the wash-tub and the line. She took 2 more pegs out of her mouth and sang with deep feeling. They say that time heals all things. They say you can always forget. But the smiles and the tears across the years, they twist my heartstrings yet. Once again, if you're not familiar with Cockney or if you're not a native English speaker, I'll just do that in standard English. They say that time heals all things. They say you can always forget. But the smiles and the tears across the years, they twist my heartstrings yet. The passage continues, and Winston is astonished that something like this could make her feel good at all. She knew the whole driveling song by heart, it seemed. Her voice floated upward with the sweet summer air, very tuneful, charged with a sort of happy melancholy. One had the feeling that she would have been perfectly content if the June evening had been endless and the supply of clothes inexhaustible, to remain there for 1,000 years, pegging out diapers and singing rubbish. And it's now possible to have an inexhaustible supply of rubbish songs because of AI. And if AI is capable of producing songs that are equal or superior to the music that humans have been making for hundreds of years, why can't we listen to it? Technically, I can't come up with a reason, mainly because I don't believe in telling other people what sort of fun they're allowed to have. And yet, I'm very uneasy about all of this. There's something sinister in the idea of humans abdicating their creativity and giving it away to machines. I fear for the health of a society in which there's no point in learning to play a musical instrument or writing poetry or putting on a play, because something better can be summoned instantly and then be passively consumed without any effort or thought. If you look at the history of human culture, creativity is the foundation on which everything is built. People were able to write and memorize lengthy poems. telling amazing stories and remembering them through patterns of rhythm, rhyme, and alliteration. Cave dwellers who lived a tenuous hunter-gatherer existence made time to paint with their own hands, leaving behind beautiful stories of successful hunts and mighty battles. For centuries, we've acted out tales of joy and sadness and made music together. And a lot of what made these performances interesting was the uncertainty of live art. When you're doing something live, something can go wrong. And the way that performers cope with this is kind of what makes for some of the most interesting and rewarding experiences in art. I recently went to see a performance of Twelfth Night by the Lord Chamberlain's Men, a touring theater company that performs Shakespeare in the style of the late 16th century, with an all-male cast and minimal sets and props. There's a scene in Twelfth Night where some of the characters put a letter down so that another character will find it. The play was performed outdoors, and just at the moment that the letter was put into its proper position, the breeze whipped up, and it fluttered right up into the air and dropped off the edge of the stage. Now, the audience was already very happily engaged in the show. It was a great performance, but in this moment, we were now riveted. What were they going to do? This letter has to be found, or the play just cannot continue. What was going to happen? The actor who needed to place the letter squealed, staying completely in character, and he leaped out of his hiding place and ran out and dropped off the edge of the stage and picked it up. And the cool part is that the actor who needed to find the letter had already come out. And he, out of the corner of his eye, observed what was going on and very quickly just kind of had to shift the blocking to where he kept his back turned as the actor who had the letter had to get it back in position and then get very quickly back into his hiding place, all while speaking his lines and not missing a beat. And the audience was loving it. We weren't just enjoying the performance, we were now rooting for the actors to make it through this moment. And it was just this magical, serendipitous moment of theater where something went wrong, and then the scene ended up being 10 times funnier than usual because of the way that they were able to handle it in the real flesh and blood moment. There was this connection between actors and audience, and then this whole performance on top of the actual play itself. And you're just never going to get that with AI. I don't know the solutions to the questions raised by AI, and I'm pretty sure we won't be able to stop the flow of slop that's about to drench human culture. I'm not willing to say that all uses of AI will be corrosive and hollow and smother human creativity, but I worry that a lot of it will. And it's even more worrisome to me that George Orwell foresaw this problem way back in 1949, and more than 70 years later, we didn't come up with an agreement about how to deal with this issue when it inevitably arrived. Despite my reservations about AI, I don't want to tell anyone what kind of art to enjoy. I can think of uses of AI that might be really cool, such as reconstructing theatrical performances from ancient Greece, or imagining what lost episodes of Doctor Who might have been like. But as with so many new technologies, I think we need to stop and ask ourselves if we should use AI rather than merely if we can, especially if using AI comes at the cost of extinguishing the creative spark that lives in all of us. When George Orwell created a perfectly dystopian society for his novel 1984, he made one of its defining features the total lack of art created by actual humans. The creation of art involves thinking, feeling, questioning, expressing, struggling, and overcoming, all things that are rather inconvenient to a totalitarian government. I'm not saying that listening to AI music will instantly lead us to a life as miserable as that of Winston Smith, but I think it will make us more likely to let our lives be something that happens to us rather than something we are actively and creatively directing. I worry that if we let our creative muscles fall into atrophy, we won't be engaged citizens. We won't be willing to put in the effort it takes to set and achieve goals. The worst outcome of a post-creative world is 1984, which is terrifying, but the best outcome is the culture depicted in WALL-E, which is depressing. So because I'm one of those pretentious high school kids who read 1984 back in the day and have revisited this book over and over, I'm going to remain pretty skeptical of ghastly rubbish produced by AI and do what I can to continue to support honest to goodness real art that connects human beings together. I don't see the great amount of labor that goes into art as a negative thing. I actually see it as part of the point. The struggle to create art, the time it takes, the things that people learn about themselves when they put in the real, honest to gosh, hard effort, these things really, really matter. And I actually think we need them on a biological level. I don't think that abdicating our creativity to machines is going to do anything to lessen the big problems we have today with anxiety and a sense of lack of meaning and purpose in life. I think that by being creative, we end up creating a lot of the meaning that makes us happy and brings us together as a society. There's far more meaning in a school music concert with its squawking violins and incorrect notes than there is in 1,000 AI-generated albums, no matter how pleasantly sounding they are. And at the risk of sounding presumptuous, I think George Orwell would agree.